Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are looking at Obeka, Splitter of Seconds. Obeka is a 1 Grixis 2/5 Ogre Warlock with Menace, and whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you get that many additional upkeep steps after this one. So this is just some good old-fashioned Grixis upkeep tribal. So why play Obeka, right? Multiple upkeep triggers every turn can lead to really cool interactions. We only get them once per turn regularly, so now we can have them multiple times. She has a very high potential to kill each opponent in one turn. That's kind of how we're going to build this. This deck list is focused on having Obeka pretty much win the game in one turn. It's a super unique build for Grixis decks because Grixis is generally like control. You think of like Nekusar, and there is a little bit of control in here, but generally it's just so that Obeka lives and we can connect with her. And then the deck is super customizable for both competitive and casual games. This is more on a competitive, we want to win in one turn style, but you can customize this deck with whatever kind of cards you want just to, whatever your play group's at. So here's the game plan. We need her to win. The deck is bad without her. Like, without Obeka, the deck is literally untap, upkeep, pass. Like, that's it. We do all of our things with that, and then we don't have much else to do because we need her to hit. Early game, we want to get a lot of mana. We want to play our mana rocks, and then small upkeep triggers, really guys, like things that cost less than 3 or so. So we at least have some things on the board that we can copy right away when we connect, rather than just playing her turn 4 and then playing some enchantment turn 5, so then we get the big triggers off that, which is still fine. Mid-game, we're going to want to play Obeka and then keep her protected with counters and just general control cards. Really, we just want to leave her. We don't want people to kill her right away. That's the big fear with the deck, because the deck doesn't work without her. And then late game, we want to attack with Obeka, and then once an opponent has no blocks, hit her with the pump spell. Give her, let's say, +3, +0, which will give us will give us 5 more upkeeps. So it's pretty good. That can deal a lot of damage in 5 upkeeps. So let's talk about vulnerabilities. Killing Obeka, not good. Right? We need Obeka. Not connecting with Obeka is also a huge deal in this deck. Obeka has built-in evasion. She has menace, right? So we're not really killing anyone with commander damage here. We're just trying to, whoever we can connect with, that's what we want, right? If we can't connect, the deck, she might as well not be on the field, right? And then fizzling. Brink of Madness is not a fizzling card, but your face is going to be just like his face if we start to fizzle. Fizzling is we're getting too many lands, so we're not getting any upkeep triggers that we need. We're not getting any mana rocks. We're color screwed, whatever, right? The big fear of fizzling is just we have Obeka, we have nothing to copy. We have only lands, we have nothing to cast. We have so many things to cast, we have no lands. Like anything that can go wrong with the deck, we're going to be looking like that guy. So just channel stuff. The deck's pricey. It cost about $650 as of the making of this video. Get some of the cards you need from the link below. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that, whatever. I will say, though, the $650 price tag is inflated. There are just a handful of cards that are like $100. Like, there's a Dockside in the deck that's like $70. There's an Ancient Tomb, spoiler alert. That's like, you can really trim this price down by making smaller cuts. Let's go into creatures. There's no Planeswalkers in the deck. Again, we focus on upkeeps, right? So Bonehorde Dracosaur is a whatever 5/5 for 5 with flying first. Great, doesn't matter. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exile a land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token, and then if you exile the non-land card, make a treasure. The guy is good, but the treasure is more important, right? So let's just focus face value, assuming we have no pump spells. For the rest of this deck list, we'll say we're only connecting for 2, right? We're only connecting with 2. So that gives us 2 upkeeps. That lets us exile the top 4 cards of our deck. We can still play them this turn. And then we're either getting 3/1s, which we will chump with, or just attack with because they're 3/1s, who cares? Or we'll make more mana to go even more nuts. Braid's Conjure Adept at the beginning of each player's upkeep. That player may put an artifact, creature, or land from their hand onto the battlefield. The cool thing is ideally, we're not going to our opponent's upkeep. We're just focusing on our upkeep, and we're going to take a lot of upkeeps. So we can just start dumping artifacts, creatures, and lands. The lands is an important part just because we need the mana during main phase 2, just so we can set up if we don't win at all. But it's good insurance. It's good to just keep things going. It's good. Creeping Bloodsucker is just a great card. At the beginning of your upkeep, deal 1 damage to each opponent. You gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. So, assuming we have 2 upkeeps, we really have 3 upkeeps a turn because we just have an upkeep naturally, and then we'll get 2 with Obeka at worst. He deals 3 damage to each opponent, and then we'll gain 9. Sounds really good to me. Dockside Extortion, as he enters the battlefield, you make a lot of tokens. We need Dockside in this deck just because he is too efficient at making mana. That's really it. He's just too good at it. And when we need to play Obeka as fast as possible, he can make that happen. Nightscape Familiar, just blue and red spells you cast cost 1 less. That's just a benefit. It's just a good cost reducer. We can regenerate him if need be, but he makes literally 60% of our deck cheaper. Roaming Throne, when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It's probably going to be Ogre or Warlock, because whatever it is, if a triggered ability of another creature you control, whatever triggers, it does it additional time. So now, if we connect with Obeka, instead of having 2 more upkeeps, we now have 4 upkeeps. He's just meant to double Obeka. Shieldred Whispering One, at the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's pretty much why we're running it if things die. We're not playing Shieldred super early. Just the idea is we're going to take 3 more upkeeps with her, and then we just essentially reanimate our grave. Sin Prodder is a tricky card, right? Forget the menace, forget the whatever. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have you put that card in your graveyard. If a player does, Sin Prodder deals damage to that player equal to the card's converted mana cost. Otherwise, put that card in your hand. Here's how we look at this card, right? Or here's the bad of this card. The bad is that if you reveal a land, it's just going straight to your graveyard because it has 0 mana cost, and your opponents basically have the choice of, hey, have you mill a land for no cost or detriment? Why not? The cool thing about this card is, let's look at Shieldred and Whispering One, right? If we're taking a bunch of upkeeps and we're revealing hey, anyone want to take 7 so I don't draw the Shieldred? Hey, someone want to take 7 so I have I don't keep the Skyline Deposit? Those big cards, people aren't going to want to take 7. And again, you're doing this multiple times. So ideally, you're probably milling a couple cards and then hitting someone for 5 or 6. That's how I look at this card. Skyline Deposit. When he enters, you become the Monarch, which is kind of a low-key sub-theme for this deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you're the Monarch, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token. Here's how I imagine this guy going down, right? We have Obeka on the field already. We play Skyline Deposit, right? We are now the Monarch. We connect. We get 2 5/5 dragons on top of Skyline Deposit, who is a 5/5. But him entering and making us the Monarch is big because we have a lot of Monarch cards in this deck, and being able to be the Monarch on our turn for our upkeep triggers is a big deal. Spawn of Mayhem, he has Spectacle, so he can be a little bit cheaper. He's a Flying Trample 4/4 for 4, which is good, and at the beginning of your upkeep, he deals 1 damage to each player, and then if you have 10 or less life, you put a 1/1 counter on him. That's just really meant to deal a lot of damage to everyone, because again, if we're taking 3 upkeeps, just dealing 3 damage to everyone is good. And he can get even bigger. It's just a clock if we take a lot of upkeeps, plus we have a lot of passive draining and whatever, right? Sphinx of the Second Sun. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, there is an additional beginning phase after that. So its beginning phase is the untap upkeep draw. So an ideal turn with Obeka is untap, upkeep, have all our triggers happen, draw a card, go to main phase 1, play whatever stupid things we want to play so then Obeka can copy them, attack with Obeka, copy them, take a couple more upkeeps, go to post-combat main phase, have another untap upkeep draw. So whatever kind of card draw nonsense we did, whatever treasure generation, however much damage we dealt, we now essentially have another upkeep trigger. The untap trigger is huge, and then the draw. It's a good spell. Twilight Prophet is very risky. Twilight Prophet can very well win us the game by itself. It's Flying Ascend. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you've ascended, reveal the top card of your deck, put it in your hand. Each player loses life, and you gain life equal to that card's mana value. Sphinx of the Second Sun is good. That's the ideal, right? It's we have let's say 5 upkeeps, and Sphinx of the Second Sun, it's all right, everyone loses 8 and we gain 8. Right? Spawn of Mayhem, everyone loses 5 or 4, we gain 4. Twilight Prophet with a lot of upkeeps can straight up win the game. The final 2 creatures are Urbrask Heretic Praetor and Wildfire Devils. Urabrask is good just because he's a hasty 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library. You may play that this turn. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, the next time they would draw a card, instead they exile the top card and they can play it. So essentially, our opponents don't draw cards anymore. They can't really hold up interaction just because it's exiled until end of turn. He's good just because he'll exile a bunch of cards from our deck and we can just play them, which is essentially card draw, right? And he essentially gives us an extra draw on our turn, which I think is good. So again, we connect with Obeka. We're exiling whatever, drawing like a bunch of cards. Wildfire Devils can be risky. When it enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, choose a player at random. That player exiles an instant or sorcery card from their graveyard. Copy that card and we can cast that copy without paying its mana cost, right? The issue is if it hits someone. So in my head, it's good because it'll hit like ramp, it'll hit like draw, it'll hit like a kill spell for our opponent's creatures, whatever, right? That part's good. The negative of the card is if we hit our graveyard and we don't have anything to copy. If we hit someone's graveyard and they have nothing to copy, it's just not great. Or if we like hit someone's graveyard and let's say we exile a nuke and we don't want to wipe the board, like we just kind of miss out on that trigger. Going into sorceries, Demonic Tutor. I don't like adding too many tutors to the decks just because I like to keep them more casual and more fun, but Demonic Tutor is when we're playing a deck that is meant to win the game in one turn, we need Demonic Tutor to get the cards that can make that happen. Feed the Swarm, destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls, you lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. We can get rid of other permanents and stuff, but we don't have a ton of great enchantment removal options in Grixis, and Feed the Swarm is good. And then we have Inspiring Refrain. 4 mana, draw 2 cards, and then exile it with 3 time counters on it. So essentially, this card never goes away, right? It's pretty much always in exile or we cast it. It's really only in exile. The Suspend 3 is big because it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last time counter is removed for it, you cast it without paying its mana cost. So if we take like 3 extra turns, or 3 extra upkeeps, we're not directly profiting off of it, but we're essentially always drawing 2. If we take an extra 3, just because it's going to get rid of all the time counters and then it's going to exile itself again. Same exact idea with Rousing Refrain, except we're going to get a lot more red, and it's huge that the mana doesn't end as whatever steps phase it, the phases end. So we can go throughout the rest of our turn with just a ton of red mana to just start dumping things down. Going into instants, we have Arcane Denial. It's counter a spell, and then its controller draws 2, and we draw 1. We really just want the 1. If we're going to counter a spell anyway, we might as well get a card draw out of it, which is going to help us in the long run. Blazing Crescendo. Target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn. Exile the top card of your deck, you can play it, right? This is good. We attack with Obeka. There's no blocks. Obeka is now a 5/6 essentially when we cast Blazing Crescendo. We now take an extra 5 upkeeps, which is good. Blazing Shoal is also good in the same aspect. Red X, you may remove her. If we have a big red card, we can exile it just for free. But the idea is we want to just dump a ton of mana into it, have target creature, target Obeka get plus 5/+0 until end of turn, so we can get 7 more upkeeps. And that's a lot of damage. Borrowed Hostility, we just kind of pick what we need. The main reason I'm running it is just because we can just pay 1 mana to give Obeka +3/+0 and just have 5 more upkeeps. Counterspell is Counterspell, we just, we don't want to deal with it. Dark Ritual is really just to get Obeka down fast or have our bigger spells also come on in just quicker. We just need mana quick in this deck. We have Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship. If you control a commander, if you both control a commander, do it without paying its mana cost. Deflecting Swat, if someone tries to kill Obeka, we can stop that, right? Fierce Guardianship, if something tries to kill Obeka, we can counter it, right? That's really just how I look at it. Someone wants to wipe a board, we can just counter something. Someone wants to have a targeted kill spell, whatever. It's just ways to keep Obeka safe. And since the deck plans on always having her around, the SWAT and Guardianship are good. Hatred is a beautiful reserve list card. It essentially says, as an additional cost, you pay X life. And then target creature gets +X/+0 until end of turn. Here's why I like this card, right? Hear me out on this. We attack with Obeka, right? There's no blocks. We then hate someone. We say, all right, we're gonna pay 35 life. Obeka is now a 37/5, right? we are now taking 37 more upkeeps, and someone is dying to commander damage. That's pretty big. Hatred is a card that will just end the game. Flat out. It is so good. Monsters, before I even get that, you can also with Hatred, what you can do for a fun fact is if opponent A attacks opponent B and they don't block, you can just kill your whole life total to just make that creature like +40/+40 and have them die instantly. Like, Hatred's really good. Anyway, Monstrous Rage. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and then you make a monstrous roll, which gives it +1/+1 in trample. So if we get a weird block or whatever, it's just Obeka is at least trampling over. And the nice thing is the monstrous roll sticks around. So even though it gives her essentially +3/+1 until end of turn, at least the enchantment sticks around. So then if we need another turn, she'll still be bigger. Negate is just a counterspell. Someone tries to kill something, do something we don't like, whatever. Psychotic Fury. Target multicolored creature gains double strike until end of turn, draw a card. This card's huge, right? Double strike is a thing with Obeka because it says whenever she deals combat damage to a player, take that many extra turn steps after this phase, right? Which is actually interesting because I might be wrong on this, but this is how I think it would go down, right? We attack with Obeka, we give her double strike, right? Let's just say for 2. We take 2 additional upkeep steps after the first strike damage step. Then the regular damage step comes through, and then we connect with another 2, and then we take another 2 on upkeep steps with that. So either way, face value, we're gonna double up her. We just double up her. Double strike means that we double up the amount of upkeeps we get, which is good, especially if we play Monstrous Rage and then Psychotic Fury, and then we're essentially taking 5? We're essentially taking 10 more upkeeps. That can be pretty good. Swan Song is just a cheap counter to get rid of something we don't like. Terminate is just to kill a problematic creature. If someone has too many creatures and we can't get through, it's pretty much fine. We can get rid of it. It's just good to have in general. Uncaged Fury, 3 mana. Target creature gets +1/+1 double strike. In a vacuum, that's going to give us 6 more upkeep triggers, which is good. And then the final instant and a land is Valakut Awakening. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck and then draw that many cards +1. We use this just to filter, pretty much. If we're stalling out, if we're fizzling, if we're only drawing lands, we're not drawing any of the upkeep triggers we want to draw, Valakut Awakening can make that happen. Going into artifacts, we have Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone, which are pretty much the same thing. It's just a mana rock at the end of the day. But then Darksteel Reactor, however, indestructible. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a charge counter on it. When it has 20 or more charge counters on it, you win the game. Now, I don't know if we're going to win right away. Maybe with Hatred, if we get a big attack and double strike or whatever, we could win in one shot with Darksteel Reactor. But this might just be a 2-for-1, like 2-turn, kind of win the game kind of deal. And it's also indestructible, so really hard to get rid of. Lightning Greaves, just to put on Obeka to keep her safe, and she can attack right away, so she can't be targeted, which is bad for our pump spells. But I think I'd rather have Obeka be guaranteed to, be protected and not killed, and haste, than just giving her a pump spell. Portal to Phyrexia, it's a board wipe for pretty much each opponent. Sacrificing 3 creatures is huge. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, put target card from a graveyard, creature card from a graveyard, onto the battlefield under our control, and it's a Phyrexian. So we are just going to get a multiple amount of the best creatures in all graveyards, which is good to me. Soul Ring. Swiftfoot Boots is just better Greaves. It is and it isn't. Just having the hexproof over Shroud is big, but it does have a 1 cost to equip, which can be awkward. Talisman of Creativity, Talisman of Dominance, Talisman of Indulgence, they're all just mana rocks, so we can play Obeka as fast as possible. Tamiyo's Journal, at the beginning of your upkeep, investigate, tap it, sacrifice 3 clues, search your library for a card, and then put it into our hand. So, in a nutshell, right, we start our turn, we have Tamiyo's Journal on the field, we make a clue, we investigate, and then we attack with Obeka. Obeka hits for 2. We take 2 more upkeeps. We now have 3 clues. We sacrifice 3 clues, search our library for a card, and put it in our hand. It's a hard tutor, pretty much, and I think it's pretty good. And even without it, just being able to pay 2 mana to draw a card is not that bad. And then finally, Wayfarer's Bauble for the artifacts, just so we can ramp. We're a 3-color deck. Grixis doesn't have a ton of ramp options. We're running a lot of artifacts anyways, Going into enchantments, aggravated assault. Untap all creatures you control. If it's a main phase, there's an additional combat followed by additional, main phase. Activate only as a sorcery. The idea of this is if we make a lot of mana with like Rousing Refrain or Dockside or whatever, right? It's just a way on our turn we can just pay more mana and then just have an extra combat, which means more upkeep steps, which is great. Especially if Obeka is like pumped with like a +3/+0 or whatever, like that's going to stick around, and that's just a lot more upkeeps. As foretold, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on it, right? Once during each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the cost, where X is the number of time, as foretold. This could get pretty big pretty easy, and then the idea is we're just not paying for our counter spells anymore. We're not paying for the biggest spell on our turn anymore, just because it's going to get huge really easy. And then Braid of Fire has a cumulative upkeep of adding a red, right? So here is the issue with Braid of Fire. You only have your upkeep to spend the mana, right? So cumulative upkeep, add red. The way that goes is you go to your upkeep, you add a red, and then the next turn you add 2 red, and the next turn you add 3 red, right? The issue is that red won't go into your main phase, so you won't really be able to use it. So for Braid of Fire, you do have to use that mana at instant speed right away. That can be done with like a lot of things, just with pump spells, because they're all instants. We can do things like sacrificing clues. There's a bunch of other stuff that we just have mana sinks for, which is good. And it's just a lot of free red mana anyways. Copy Enchantment. So Copy Enchantment is in this deck, following pretty much all of the courts. We would love to copy any of the courts, and that's why it's here, right? All courts do the same thing. When they enter, you become the Monarch, and then they have their smaller ability, right? At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the Monarch, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. And that can straight up kill someone. If you have, if someone has a low hand and we have multiple upkeep steps, that's huge. Court of Cunning, any number of target players mills 2 cards. If you're the Monarch, they mill 10 cards. Assuming we just connect with Obeka, we just have someone, each opponent mill 20 cards, or we have each opponent lose potentially 12 life or discard 4 cards. Really good. Court of Embereth, this is one that can just straight up kill people. They all pretty much can. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 3/1 Red Knight creature token. Then, if you're the Monarch, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of creatures you control. So, let's just not even talk about any other creature, not even Obeka, right? Let's say we have 4 upkeeps, right? We are the Monarch. We make a 3/1. It deals 1 damage to each opponent. And then we go to our upkeep 2. We now have 2 of those guys. It deals 2 damage to each opponent. So now essentially a total of 3 damage. Then we get another guy. It's going to be 6 damage to each opponent. And then it's going to be another guy, which is going to be 9 damage 12 damage to each opponent. So that can get pretty big pretty quick. And that's not even that's just that card by itself with multiple upkeeps. That's not even counting we have Obeka or any other guy, right? Court of Ire is pretty much the same deal, right? Maybe to a lesser extent. At the beginning of your upkeep, deal 2 damage to any target. If you're the Monarch, it deals 7. We're now having multiple upkeeps. That is essentially, let's say, 4 upkeeps, 28 damage. Very, very brutal. Straight up kills people. Court of Locthwain, you can't really judge too well. Just because with all cards that rely on your opponent's deck, you hope for the best. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of target opponent's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. If you're the Monarch, you still do that, except you can do it without paying its mana cost. So we could get some pretty cool things from our opponent's deck, especially if we're oh yeah, we just got the top 4 cards of our opponent's deck. That's still pretty good. We see what they got. Then we have Court of Vantress, enters become the Monarch. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose up to 1 target enchantment or artifact. If you're the Monarch, you may create a token that's a copy of it. If you're not the Monarch, you may have Court of Vantress become a copy of it, except it has this ability. Court of Vantress is huge, because if we're the Monarch and we have any other court on the field, let's say Court of Ire, right? It either becomes a copy of Court of Ire, and then it's dealing 14 damage to each opponent per upkeep we have, or that's if we're not the Monarch. If we are the Monarch, we now make a copy of that, like each upkeep, right? So let's say we have 3 upkeeps and we copy Court of Ire. All right, upkeep, let's say upkeep 1, we have Court of Ire hit, and then we have the Vantress copy Court of Ire, right? Upkeep 2, we have it deal 7 damage, and then the copy deals 7 damage, and then we make another copy. And then upkeep 3, we're dealing 21 damage off that. So it's crazy. Endless Evil. Enchant creature you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of enchanted creature, except it's a 1/1. Don't worry about the bottom. The idea is we put this on a guy that can make mana, or a guy that has a big, like, ETB effect. Like, let's go to creatures really quick. I know it's going to be a hike, right? It's a while. It's great to put it on Bonehorde because we can make a lot of 3/1s or make a lot of mana. It's great to put it on Creeping Bloodsucker because it's every copy we do is going to deal 1 damage and gain us 3 life. Dockside's probably the best bet. Roaming Throne's also a pretty good bet if we can get another copy on it. Sin Prodder's pretty brutal too, because it's your opponent's going to have to let us draw a bunch of cards or take a lot of damage. Skyline Deposit's going to make us a lot of 5/5s. Like, Spawn of Mayhem's going to start dealing, like, damage to a lot of people. And then Sphinx of the Second Sun, like, that's like at least just 1 additional main phase. Twilight Prophet is just 2 more, it's just more Twilight Prophets. Urbrask won't matter, and Wildfire Devils, it could matter, right? But generally, that card is pretty crazy, right? It doesn't matter if it's a 1/1, we just want the ability of the card. Same thing with Estrid's Invocation. You may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of enchantment, of any enchantment, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile it, and if you do, return it to the battlefield, essentially having it become a new copy of an enchantment. So Estrid's Invocation is essentially just copy enchantment that can blink itself to choose new targets. Ill-Gotten Inheritance, I just love this card. It's honestly a pet card, and it just works well for the deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain 1 life. Which is pretty good when you take multiple upkeeps. And then in a pinch, we can sacrifice it, deal 4 damage to target opponent, and you gain 4 life. This card's so good. Mechanized Production is another card that can just straight up win us the game. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of Enchanted Artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name, you win the game. Very cool, right? A way we can do this is, I also do want to say, the Enchanted Permanent doesn't have to be the same name, right? And tokens count too. So let's just say we have Mechanized Production and we enchant Soul Ring. We don't need 8 Soul Rings. If we have 8 treasure tokens, we have 8 tokens named treasure, and then we'll win the game on the upkeep. But even so, just putting it on one of our artifacts, like even like a talisman or anything, just making multiple copies of that is still pretty good, because it's like, oh, I'll put it on Arcane Signet and we have 3 upkeeps. So we get 3 more mana. We essentially just ritualed. It's cool. Palace Siege enters the battlefield. Choose cons or dragons. That's rhetorical. You're most likely just going to choose dragons. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. That's the one that's going to kill people. Cons is fine if you're like in a pinch, but dragons is the one that's going to end the game. And then finally, we have Phyrexian Arena. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card and lose a life. That's a lot of card draw. It's also a lot of life loss, but we have so much life gain in this deck just through like Creeping Bloodsucker, Ill-Gotten Inheritance, yada yada yada. The life loss doesn't really matter. And then we have Virtue of Persistence as a kill spell early on, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard on the battlefield under your control. So again, just multiple times per turn, reanimating the best creature in any graveyard. It's pretty good. Going into land, it's nothing too crazy. We're running all the check lands, we're running all the shock lands, all of the vow lands, hunt lands. I don't know, you know these ones. They're good. All of the battle bond lands. And then going into the meat and cheese of the lands, we have Ancient Tomb to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool, or, Ancient Tomb to deal 2 damage, who cares, we gain a lot of life. The 2 colorless is big because it lets us cast, multiple, early game it's great because it lets us cast multiple, rocks early on. Even late game it's fine because we do have some higher costed things in the deck. Command Beacon is good because if Obeka dies, we can at least get her back later and not have to pay a ton of mana. Cavern of Souls, you're going to say whatever Obeka is, Ogre Warlock, one of those, just so she is uncounterable. Then we just have Command Tower, Crumbling Necropolis, Exotic Orchard. They're pretty much all going to tap for all of our colors. Hall of the Bandit Lord, it enters the battlefield tapped, and then you tap it to pay 3 life to add 1 mana to your mana pool, doesn't matter. If you cast a creature with it, that gets haste. Ideally, Obeka has haste right away. Prismatic Vista, just because it got reprinted and I think it's nice. So I think the card's going to go down. It's just better Evolving Wilds, and we're a 3-color deck, so we really need to be able to be on top of our mana. Reliquary Tower, so we have no max hand size because we do draw a lot of cards in the deck. And then finally, we have Xander's Lounge, which is just the best Grixis land. Island, swamp, mountain, enters tapped, cycling. It's good. Going to the basics, we just have 5 islands, 5 mountains, and 4 swamps. I think that's like 36 or 37 lands, including Valakut as a MDFC. So I think that's plenty. We have so much mana in this deck in Generation. So we can try and do a lot of things on each of our turns. Thank you guys for watching. Get the cards you need from the link down below. It helps me out and helps the channel grow. And then like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see what more videos like this. And then if you have a specific deck you want me to do, let me know in the comments and I'll make it. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.